The Edmonton Oilers are on to round two, whether it be against the Nashville Predators or the Vancouver Canucks. We're going to see what history can tell us about the Oilers' prospects of going all the way.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Sararis. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers a part of your day. But before we get to today's show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Game off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. Download Monopoly Go, now free on Google Play or the Apple App Store. Game on. So, on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, we are going to take a dive into recent NHL history and see what we can glean about how the Oilers have played so far and how it might translate to the rest of their playoff run using recent Stanley Cup champions as the model. I make no bones about it. I am a bit of a nerd. I am a dedicated student of history, and I passionately believe that you can find out a lot about where things are trending in any field based on what's happened in recent history. One of the first episodes I did of the show about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago now, was an episode talking about how scoring was up, how power play opportunities were up, how save percentage was down, and that the Oilers are one of the teams that's kind of at the forefront of that. That's really high skill, really dangerous scoring chances, and really able to use their high-end talent to manipulate space on the ice and create offense at a really high level. Maybe not first in the league, but in the upper echelon of offenses. And using that idea, we can start with the foundational principle of what does success look like? And it's unfair to say a successful season in the NHL is only when you win the Stanley Cup, being that there are 32 teams and only one team gets to bring the trophy home at the end of June. I think you can have a successful season without winning the Stanley Cup, but the Oilers' goals being what they are means that that's the bar. I don't think anybody would be irate if the Oilers made the conference finals and lost in 7 games, if they made the cup final and lost in 7 games. If they did everything they could and they just didn't get the bounces in a game 7 after playing a long series against a good team, I think as a hockey fan, you have enough perspective to understand how difficult it is to win. And because of that, you are able to rise above the shenanigans and the talking points that the talking heads will surely beat over everyone's head. I'm recording this on Thursday evening. The Leafs-Bruins game is on, and I can't help but apply some of the conversation that was swirling around the Leafs to the Oilers in the same respect, because you heard me bring this up on yesterday's episode. This idea that whenever a team starts losing in the playoffs, it's got to be someone's fault. Someone's got to change something. That it can't. If you're losing, that means you're bad. If you're bad, you got to change things. And I think we rush too quickly to saying something is bad, as opposed to trying to analyze why it is bad, why it's not performing. If you want to say the Leafs aren't playing well, why? Because their power play is not scoring. Why? Austin Matthews is hurt. Okay, now we have a conversation. We have a talking point. How can the Leafs make up for the lack of goal scoring of Austin Matthews? You probably can't. He is the best pure goal scorer in the league. So when we're talking about it from an Oilers perspective, you heard me talk about it on the second segment of yesterday's episode, this idea that we can all take a deep breath. The vultures will not be swirling around Leon Draisaitl's name as a pending unrestricted free agent. They will not be swirling around Connor McDavid's name, who's a season next season, and then free agent. The vultures cannot swirl around them because the Oilers handled their business in round 1. When you take care of business and you meet your expectations, you are virtuous. You do a good job. There's a reason Ken Holland was able to do an interview with The Athletic about their season. The GM of the losing team does not give Pierre LeBrun his time the day after a playoff game. That is only for winners. You only hear the winning GMs in the publications. You only hear the good coaches in the publications after a playoff series. So with the idea being we want to mimic success. Ooh, the Leafs just got the lead. Good for them. I hope the Leafs force a game 7 and make the Bruins sweat. A series is never over till it's over, and all the prognosticators who want to talk about, well, it's over, that the Bruins are dead. All it takes is one bounce in a game 7. Ask the Leafs, ask the Bruins. You can show up for that game 7 feeling like you have enough energy to fly a plane. You might not get out of the starting block, but enough about me getting distracted. The Oilers' goal this season is unequivocally to win the Stanley Cup. I think everybody understands that. And what that tells you, it tells you who you're in competition with. Because of the teams that remain, Vegas and Dallas, both bona fide Stanley Cup contenders. Either of those teams could win the Stanley Cup. Not a surprise in the slightest. And Colorado. I think those 3 teams in the West are unequivocally Stanley Cup contenders. You came into this season expecting Colorado to be a Stanley Cup contender. You probably expected Dallas. You probably expected Vegas. The paths they took to get here, different. Okay, and then out east, Florida, the Rangers, Carolina, maybe the Leafs if you want to be generous, but I don't think anyone would be surprised if you kept an air of skepticism being that they're the Leafs and you didn't feel they were a Stanley Cup contender, especially with their questions in net and on their back end. But when we talk about this Oilers team, the talent, the depth of talent, which is something we're going to talk about in the second segment, and I think bodes well for their future. I shouldn't say future, bodes well for their playoff future because it reflects well in comparison to other recent teams that went all the way to win the Stanley Cup. So that should be encouraging. But continuing on this thread. So of the teams remaining, the 2 in the 1 series, Dallas and Vegas, unequivocally Stanley Cup contenders. Colorado, Stanley Cup contender. Then out east, Rangers, Carolina, Florida. We got 6, and then the Oilers, that makes 7. When you start to size the Oilers up against those opponents, then we can start to have a conversation of, well, what are the Oilers better at than these teams? Where do they have more talent? And I think the only team that has a real argument to say their 1-2 can hang with the Oilers is Colorado. You go over to the Rangers, you go to Florida, you go to Carolina. Look, I like Barkov and I love Matthew Tkachuk. Matthew Tkachuk's one of my favorite players in the entire league. McDavid, for sure. McDavid and Draisaitl, for sure. McDavid and Draisaitl over Panarin and Trocheck, Panarin and Zibanejad, whichever Rangers you want to take. Over Carolina as well, Aho and Gensel. You're taking McDavid and Draisaitl. Are you going to take Jason Robertson and Rupe Hintz? Or are you going to take McDavid and Draisaitl? Vegas, okay. That's a conversation now. Eichel and Stone? You're probably going to take McDavid and Draisaitl. But Stone's defense, it makes you think about it just a little bit. And as we are going to talk about in the second segment, one area that I think the Oilers are better equipped for the playoffs this year than they've been basically at any other point when they've made the playoffs with McDavid on the team. They have a little bit more forward depth, not an overwhelming amount of depth. I mean, we're not talking about the Lightning back-to-back teams with one of the best third lines of this entire salary cap era. We are not talking about the Colorado team of 2 years ago that had a really strong third line with great bottom 6 performances from guys like Andrew Cogliano. The Oilers have a solid forward group, and they ask a lot of their good players, but their good players answer the bell because that's how good they are. And coming up next, we're going to pull some key stats. We're going to talk about comparing how many games it takes to win the Stanley Cup. We're going to talk about how many different guys score goals on the way to winning a Stanley Cup, how many different guys have point contributions on the way to winning a Stanley Cup, and a whole lot more. So stick around. Coming up next on Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. Sports fans, it's the best time of the year. We got the hockey playoffs. We got the NBA playoffs. We got the Major League Baseball season in full swing. We got Formula One. We got NASCAR. We are eating well, friends, and you can help get in on the action over at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you to everybody who's made this episode of Locked On Oilers a part of your Friday. Hope you are looking forward to the weekend as much as I am. Jam-packed sports calendar. Recording this during Knicks-Sixers Game 6. Hopefully the Knicks win, and my entire Saturday is free of New York sports other than the Mets. But nevertheless, I digress. You see what I did there? It took a minute to get the words out, but words are hard. One of the things I love doing in my hockey analysis is looking for patterns, looking for trends, trying to see what can you rip off from successful teams. I feel people have too much pride. People are too stuck in their ways to admit that if someone else is doing something better than them, you should try and get some ideas from them. So one of the working theories I've had for a long time, and this isn't even really a theory at this point, the math bears this out. You need to win at least one of your playoff series in less than 6 games. Generally speaking, the team that wins the Stanley Cup plays between 22 and 24 playoff games. If you average that out, you're looking at about 6 per round. So a team that's going 7 games in the first 2 rounds, they're probably not going all the way. You can do it. It's not impossible, but it increases the difficulty and it increases the odds that it increases the odds of a weird variance play messing you up, that you lose in an overtime in an elimination game, or your goalie lets in a stinker and snowballs a game out of there that you had no business losing. Those types of plays and those types of games are why it is crucial to minimize your risk as much as you can. And the Oilers did their first step. They got 5. So in theory, if we're going to say 23, 24, if we're going to say 24, we'll use a medium range number. Some teams have won with 25 in recent years. Here, I'll pull it up right now on my spreadsheet. I have it written down here. So of the teams that have won the Stanley Cup, last year, Vegas 22, Colorado the year before 20, Tampa Bay the year before that 23, and then Tampa Bay the year before that 25. So we're talking about the Oilers having rough, if the Oilers are going to go all the way, they're going to play about 5.5, 6 games around. They've already given themselves a little bit of room here in round 1 by winning in 5. That gives you some room to go to a game 7. The more game 7s you play, the more unlikely it is you're going to be able to win all 4 of those game 7s. And the analogy I'll give you, and this is going to be very unsatisfying for you as a hockey fan who feels, well, we have some of the best players in the world. Yeah, you do. Over the course of a single game, anything can happen. All it takes is one weird bounce. All it takes is one missed save, and really quickly your season unravels. I think about the Bruins losing 4-0 to the Blues in Game 7 of the 2019 Cup Final a lot. That Bruins team was unequivocally more talented and better than the Blues. Don't get me wrong. That Blues team, they won the Stanley Cup, so they deserved the Stanley Cup. That Bruins team is significantly more talented. You look on both ends, whether we're talking offense, defense, or in net. Yeah, Binnington had a nice month, but Rask still one of the best goalies in the world at that point. McAvoy wasn't what he is now, but he was still pretty good. You still had late prime, I would even say declining, but still good Chara, Bergeron, Marchand, Pasta. Really good team. That Blues team, young, scrappy, good for them, but anything can happen in a game 7. So these are the key stats I pulled. So I'm going to look over at my notes here, and we're going to talk in comparison the Oilers to recent Stanley Cup winners, okay? So this year, so far, the Oilers have played 5 games. They've had 10 different goal scorers, and they have had 14 different players contribute a point. Now we're going to start talking about the Oilers of recent past and the team that won the Stanley Cup in that given season. So last year, Edmonton played 12 playoff games. They had 13 different players contribute a goal. They had 18 different players contribute a point. The Stanley Cup champion Golden Knights had 18 different players contribute a goal, 20 different players contribute a point. 2 years ago, Colorado, Edmonton plays 16 playoff games, 15 different goal contributors, 19 different point contributors. In comparison to the Avalanche, 16 different players scored a goal, 20 different players assist. Edmonton, the second Tampa Bay Cup, eliminated in the qualifying round, 4 games. Eliminate 2021, eliminated in 4 games, swept by the Jets. 7 different players score a goal, 13 different players contribute a point. The bubble, the first bubble, the actual bubble, my brain is fried. The bubble, Edmonton eliminated in 4 games, 7 different players score a goal, 10 different players contribute a point. That Tampa Bay team that won the Cup that year, 16 different goal scorers, 23 different players contribute a point. And then 2016, 2017, the other year the Oilers made the playoffs with McDavid, 13 different players. The Oilers played 13 games. They had 12 different players contribute a goal, and they had 19 different players contribute a point. Pittsburgh that year, 18 different players contribute a goal, 21 different players contribute a point. So the Oilers are going to need offense throughout their lineup. That's been a recurring theme. You've heard me talk about that quite a bit on the show the last few weeks, that the key for the Oilers wasn't going to be their stars showing up, because their stars always show up. When you talk about McDavid and Draisaitl, they're both over a point per game for their careers in the playoffs. They are both as advertised. When you need them to make a play, they make a friggin' play. You look at the play Draisaitl made to draw that penalty at the end of regulation in Game 5, the elimination game. Edmonton's net is empty. LA's net is empty, and it's a scramble for a loose puck at the blue line. Leon wins the puck, skates his butt off to create space, so the defender either has to let him go and score the empty net goal, or he gets dragged down, he draws the penalty. Edmonton puts that game on ice. If the Oilers are going to keep going, which I think they're going to have a really good shot against either Vancouver or Nashville. That series resumes Friday tonight. Hopefully we'll get an answer. We will get an answer one way or another by the start of next week, but the sooner the Oilers know who they're playing, the better. The sooner you know who you're playing, the sooner you can get into your pre-scout stuff. And of course, every team has stuff on everyone. That's why you have scouting departments. Pre-scouting is very helpful. You can find information out about these teams and kind of look for deficiencies, look for weaknesses, and kind of find ways you might be able to exploit their weaknesses, especially a team you've played often like the Canucks, who are in your division, who are down to a third-string goalie with no return in sight for Thatcher Demko. So that would be really beneficial for them. But one last thought on this thread of depth and goal scoring. When you are building this out in your head of what the Oilers' path looks like, when you are in the second, third round Cup final, your star players, so we're talking McDavid, Draisaitl, we can throw Hyman in here, Bouchard in here. You need those 4 guys to play the other team's 4 guys to a push. Can McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, Hyman play McKinnon, Rantanen, Makar, and then whichever Avalanche forward you want to put in with them, or if you'd prefer to put Devon Toews as their 4th best player, sure, that's fine. If you want to say Nichushkin, whoever. Can those 2 play each other to a push? Yes, that would be a good outcome for you. If your high-end guys and their high-end guys are going back and forth scoring a lot, that's going to leave the series to come down to your bottom 6. Do you trust the Oilers' bottom 6? Do you trust Janmark? Do you trust Corey Perry? Do you trust Warren Fogle? Do you trust Ryan McLeod? That does matter. And Dylan Holloway, I should throw in there. Dylan Holloway, who had 2 goals in the first round. That matters. You are more likely than not going to need something in the ballpark. 200-ish goals if you want to go all the way to winning a Stanley Cup over the course of multiple playoff rounds, including the games you win and lose. You're going to probably need 5 goals a game at least for your team to go all the way. You're not going to need 200 goals. You're going to need 100 goals. You're going to need like 200 points. I was looking over at my notes, and something over here is about something in the next segment we're going to talk about is the leading point contributor to your team, how many goals for the total team he contributes on, which does matter. And I do think it reflects on how much a team relies on one guy. And if that one guy can get neutralized, what that does to the rest of the team. That's coming up next on Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Penalty, delay of game. You already talked about that, but there's so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day. With constantly changing tournaments and challenges, a ton include their own unique minigames like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. Get off the bench, go download it now. It's free on Google Play or the Apple App Store. Game on. Thank you to everybody hanging out on this Friday. Hopefully your weekend is going to be nice and relaxing or exciting and fun. You got to make that trade-off. Once you hit a certain age, if you go out on the weekend, you're still recovering from it on Monday and you're tired for the entire week. So if you're going to make that trade-off, I hope you have fun. It's the time of the year. It was the first really nice day of spring in New York. Went to the Met game during the day. Saw the Mets win in person. Anytime you see your favorite team win in person, it's a nice feeling. But speaking about the Oilers, everybody knows McDavid. Everybody knows Draisaitl carry an excised load of this team's responsibility, of the burden of the burden of failure or the sweet feeling of success. Both of those are inherently connected to your star players. When you have players that are this good, the expectations become, I don't want to say unmanageable, but they're very high, because then it's twofold. We talked about this the other day on Locked On Oilers. We touched on this on the Wednesday. Yeah, I think Wednesday. It might have been Thursday. I don't know. My days of the week are starting to blur together. We touched on this earlier in the week, this idea that teams and the hockey media are waiting for the Oilers to mess up so they can start trading Draisaitl and start trading McDavid to other teams, because they can't stay in Edmonton. And why would you stay in Edmonton? They keep losing. Wouldn't you want to go somewhere else and win? And instead of taking an honest account of saying they did everything they could, the players, I'm talking about McDavid and Draisaitl, the team does it whatever they can to facilitate making those guys happy. Why are they going to run out the door? Sure, you can make fun of the Oilers, the goaltending, the defense, whatever, but Edmonton is as well positioned to contend to go all the way this year as they have been in the entire time of McDavid's tenure. With so much responsibility on these guys. Talking about their point contributions is important, and I know this is getting in the weeds, and this entire topic is frankly getting in the weeds. This is something only someone like me is going to do the research on, because I find this interesting. Goal contributions. So goals, and then goals they've assisted on, whether it's primary or secondary assist. So McDavid had 12 points in the first round. He contributed on 20% of the Oilers' goals in the first round. Last year, Vegas's leading point getter, Jack Eichel, 22 games played, 26 points, 11% of Vegas's points he had a contribution on. 2 years ago, Cale Makar, 20 playoff games, 29 points. He contributed on 13% of the Avalanche goals. 3 years ago now, we're talking the second Tampa Bay team. Kucherov, 32 points in 23 games, 16% of Tampa Bay's playoff goals he contributed on. The first bubble team, the team that beat the Stars in the Cup final, Kucherov again, 25 games played, 34 points, 16% of Tampa's goals. And then 2016, 2017, the other year Edmonton made the playoffs, Genny Malkin, 25 games played, 28 points, 13% of the Pittsburgh Penguins goals he contributed on to some degree. So in talking about the Oilers, you've heard me talk a lot about their need for their secondary scoring to find meaningful ways to contribute. You have heard me talk a lot. You have heard me in particular talk of Dylan Holloway a lot. And that's because I feel like somebody like that, somebody who doesn't have a huge track record at the NHL level, somebody who has high-end offensive skills, but just hasn't garnered the trust of his coach to be able to play significant minutes, to play a lot. And it's both frustrating, but you understand because the coach doesn't want a guy out there who's not going to be able to make things happen, who's a liability. And you go and look. When you look at the tier of minutes Dylan Holloway exists in, he's not playing a whole ton. He's playing 11.22 per game, which is roughly where you would peg the line between a third and fourth liner. 11.22 is just not a significant enough amount of ice time. He is not playing with high-end offensive talented forwards. And that's the type of guy that if you give the right opportunity to, you might be able to squeeze a little bit more out of. You might be able to find 1, 2, 3 more goals over the course of the next month and a half. Because if you're going to play till the end of June, it's going to take all 18-year skaters. You're probably going to have to go through at least 20 to 21 skaters. And I know the Oilers have made a few changes in their lineup. They did get Derek Ryan in there for 2 games, and they took some guys out. But they took Sam Carrick out, and they got Derek Ryan in. It took me a minute to remember that. I understand that at the end of the day, the Oilers' destiny will be determined by their best players, because if they play up to their ability, they're going to be able to cancel out any other team's star players. And if it comes down to a conference final against Colorado for a chance to go to the chip, or Dallas or Vegas, if you're playing any of those teams in a conference final, or in the case of, if you're playing any of those teams in the conference final, McDavid and Draisaitl are not going to let you down. They are going to do everything in their power to make that happen, to facilitate that. So it will come down to the tertiary, the support, the ancillary guys. It will come down to the 8th lead. You're going to need that big Evander Kane goal. You're going to need Nugent-Hopkins to have a 4-point game in here somewhere where he looks like the best player on his line, even if he's playing with Draisaitl. You're going to need Nuge to have one of those crazy games. You're going to need one of the other defensemen other than Bouchard or Ekholm to have a signature game at some point in these playoffs. You're probably going to need Stuart Skinner to have at least one more crazy game where he goes on a 40-something save game to find a way, because it takes everybody. This is not rocket science. This is not revolutionary information. It takes contributions from all over your lineup if you're going to go all the way, because it is such a long and grueling path. The Oilers have the talent to make it happen. I think this is easily the best Oilers team of McDavid's time with the team. I think if they don't get to at least the conference final, I would understand being disappointed. But the talent being what it is, the path being what it is, they are reasonably positioned. They're going to need more from their supporting cast. They're not going to get as many power play opportunities as they did in round 1, and they're not going to score on as many power play opportunities as they did in round 1. So with that in mind, that is the parting thought I will leave you with going into the weekend. Whether you prefer Nashville or Vancouver, if you prefer the third goalie on the better team or the better goalie on the worst team, matter of personal preference. I think if it were in Nashville, I think the Oilers would have an easier time against Nashville just because of the high-end talent disparity. But I think against Vancouver, that style of hockey would be extremely kinetic. It would be really high tempo, and it would be a real challenge to maintain defensive discipline that has kind of guided the Oilers at points this season when they have played well. The penalty kill in particular was outstanding in that first round series against the Kings. Sure, the Kings flubbed a bunch and they didn't look great, but they did just enough. But I do think that will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcast. Leave the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Hit the alarm bell to get a notification when the new episode goes live. Leave a comment. Who do you want to see the Oilers play in round 2, Nashville or Vancouver? I'll talk to you guys on Monday. Until then, let's go Oilers.